StraightallDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, this one is for the parents. Parents, you, yes, you, are responsible for your child's education. Now, we're going to talk about education for a couple episodes here. This topic is isolated, but next topic coming up, we're going to be talking about it in a little bit more detail, and we'll get to that when it's time to get to it. But before we get even into this one, let me tell you a couple things. First of all, my text message number is down below in the description to this episode. If you are not on my text list, once we start sending that out again, you'll want to be on it. So just text me now. Numbers down in the description. Secondly, workonmygame.com to get my emails. I send emails out every single day, damn near every day. You want to make sure you're getting those emails straight to your inbox. Go to workonmygame.com. Put your email address in right there. You'll be getting my emails straight to your inbox free of charge every day. Next thing, workonyourgameuniversity.com. I get those mixed up. Workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's the place where you get coached by me. That's the place you get access to 40 plus of our courses and lifetime access to them. And you get on live calls with me as your coach to help you when it comes to your mindset, your strategies, your systems, and your implementation and accountability for that implementation. All of that happens at, again, workonyourgameuniversity.com. And we own workonmygame.com too. So if you go to either one by accident, you'll still be in the right place. With that out the way, let's get into the topic here today, which again is parents. You are responsible for your child's education. Now, this whole thing of education is a hot topic these days, is growing hotter, as I believe for several reasons. First of all, more parents are becoming, actually several reasons that, let me start at the top. One of the reasons right now is because one of the big social conversations is around student loan debt and the amount of money that people who are former college students owe to the places who have given them loans. And people are complaining like, hey, I got these loans and I owe all this money, but the job that I got based on the loans, I took these loans out to get a certain job. I got a job, but the job is not giving me enough money to pay back all these damn loans. So somewhere, somehow, somebody kind of got me. Somebody scammed me in some way. People may not say it in so many words, but that's been one of the conversations. We know the outgoing Biden-Harris administration, quote unquote, forgave a bunch of student loans. There's no such thing because those loans still get paid. They get paid by taxpayers. And then going backwards, people just start looking at education in general. And you got someone like Donald Trump and his incoming administration, which is in by the time you are listening to this, saying things like he's going to dismantle or at least restructure the Department of Education, which leads to a big conversation and people talking about that and the value of it. You got people entrenched in the education system, such as teachers who are members of the teachers union, or people who are connected to the traditional structure of schooling, K through 12, all the way up through the college and university system. Then you have people like me who have been through those systems and despite that, trash those systems. And I have, and I will continue to trash those systems because they are trash. Then you have people conversing about this concept of, let's say, homeschooling, as more people are becoming open to the concept, not necessarily because more parents have just gotten better at teaching kids anything at home, but because people see what's happening in government-sponsored schooling, i.e. public school, and the kind of things going on there, like drag queens coming to school and boys turning into girls and teachers pushing their own social agendas, whether through critical race theory, DEI, Black Lives Matter, transgenderism, and things that parents generally don't agree with. And they don't want their kids in school learning this stuff. And they're like, well, what are my alternatives? If I can't afford private school, maybe I'll homeschool my kids. And then people debating, well, you're not qualified to homeschool your kid. You're not that good of a teacher because you don't have the training that a school teacher has, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of conversations about all of this. We're going to be talking about homeschooling a little bit more in a future episode. Today, I just want to talk about the general responsibility for the education of a child, period, is in the lap of the parents. That's the topic here today. And I just explained, I gave you some explanations of why I'm talking about this. Now, I don't think, as I said, that people have all of a sudden become more interested in, let me teach my kid more stuff. It's more so because of the ridiculous that the government is reporting, allowing, and promoting, combined with the fact that now with social media, we all know about it. Now, it wasn't happening this way 20, 30 years ago. I was in school, I would have seen it. but it is happening nowadays, and we can know about it. So if someone's doing something crazy in a school in Oklahoma, I can know about it in Florida because it's on the internet. Whereas 30 years ago, there was no internet through which I can get that information. Now we all can share that information, and now this is leading to bigger conversations around this concept. So it's resulted in more dialogue about schooling itself and education in general, and who is responsible for what when it comes to the schooling and education of our children. And you can tell from the title and from what I've already told you where I stand. All right, in this episode, I'm going to explain why I stand where I stand. Point number one. Today's topic, once again, is parents. You are responsible for your child's education. Number one, teachers are not at fault for what your child does not know, has not grasped, cannot do, or cannot comprehend. Even if you send your kid to school every day. You send your kid to school every day in the second grade, and at the end of second grade, your kid cannot do certain things like reading, writing, and arithmetic, doesn't understand certain stuff, is failing tests, and the school is recommending that your child repeat the second grade. That is not the fault of the teacher, even if the teacher sucks. Yes, you heard me correctly. It's not the fault of the teacher, even if the teacher is objectively garbage. They're trash. You looked at them, I looked at them, and me and you agreed that the teacher is a terrible teacher. It is still not the teacher's fault that your child cannot read, write, and do math the way you expected them to be able to, or the way that the standards expect them to be able to by the end of the second grade. That is not the teacher's fault. That's your fault. Let me explain to you why it's your fault. If your child graduates a grade or is in the midst of a grade or has completely finished school and doesn't know something, again, that is not because the school has failed them. That is not because the system has failed them. And it's not because the teacher has failed them. That is because you, the parent, has failed. You failed. Why? Because you are more responsible for what happens to your child than the school is, and the teacher and the educational system all put together. You take all of the you take the responsibility each one of them holds. The teacher, the school, and the system itself, all of their responsibilities added together is not more than your responsibility. I talk about this, and when we talk about ownership, I call it the 51-49 rule. I talk about it in episode number 1282. 51-49 rule, for those of you who don't understand those numbers, 51% is a majority ownership stake. Anyone who owns 51% of anything, they have a majority stake, meaning no one can ever own as much or more than they own, which means they are the controlling partner in the situation. Even if there are 49 other partners and each one of them owns 1%, the person who owns 51% has final say over everything. Even if the other 49 all gather together and they have one opinion, the person with the 51% has a different opinion. All the 1% 49ers added together only equals 49% of the controlling interest. The person with 51% still has the final say. They get to make the final decision. You are a 51% owner in your child's educational outcomes. So whatever your child achieves is more on you than it is on any other entity, including even your child, because the child is under your stewardship. So I already told you what I mean by this, but let me go further. You are ultimately responsible for the outcomes of your children as long as they are under your care and under your responsibility. At least until they reach the age of the majority and they step out into the world on their own, you're responsible. So if your child does not have or get the proper education, the proper learning, they can't read, do math, or have other basic skills, that's because you as a parent has not done your job. Because one of your jobs as a parent, let's be very clear, is making sure that whatever school you send your kid to, that the school is doing what you want the school to do to make sure your child is properly prepared. You decide what properly prepared means. If properly prepared means you want your kid reading the Bible in school, then you better send them to a school where they get to read the Bible. If properly prepared means you want your kid to be able to do their times tables by age 8, you better send them to a school where that's happening. If properly prepared means you want your kid to be able to write in cursive and speak multiple languages and whatever else you want them to do, you better make sure the school you're sending them to is doing that. And if they're not, then you better be up at that school, talking to them every day, making sure they do it. And if they still don't do it, then you need to take the necessary steps to make sure your kid gets what you want your kid to have, even if it means removing them from that school and doing something different. That's your responsibility as a parent. It's not the school's job to cater to your wishes. Damn sure not at a public school. That's not the way it works. All right. If you haven't tried it, it's been tried. It's not their job to cater to your wishes. Now, you can hope that they do, but they probably won't, unless your wishes happen to be what they're already doing. They're not catering to your wishes. Now, the private school, you got more say because you're putting your money on the table. They got to listen to what you say. Public school does not, even though technically your tax dollars are paying for it. They treat you as if they're the ones paying you instead of you're the ones paying them. That's how they treat you. And again, if I got this wrong, somebody let me know. If you've ever been to a school board meeting, you've seen the videos. So it is your job to keep your foot in the asses of the school administrators and teachers, or take your kid out of a school if you don't like what's happening there. By hook or by crook, you're responsible. You cannot send your kids to a school and absolve yourself of responsibility. And a lot of parents do this. That's not parenting. If you're sending your child to a school and absolving yourself of responsibility of what ends up happening with that child at said school, you are not parenting. You are not doing your duty as a parent. Doesn't mean you can't send your kid to school. But if you send your kid to school, you're still responsible for what's happening at that school because you sent them there. That's your child. You send your 8-year-old to a school, you're still responsible for what happens to and with your kid during that time of school. And if you don't like what's happening, you don't like the reports you're getting back home from your child or whoever, then why would you keep sending your kid to a place in which you're not happy what's happening? That means, again, you're abdicating your responsibility. And what you're not responsible for, you have no power over. And when you have no power, you can't make things happen. And if you don't want to have power over what's happening with your kids, what are you doing having kids? These are just rhetorical questions from me to you. They're not rhetorical questions from you to you. Moving on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is parents. You are responsible for your child's education or lack of education. Point number 2. It is your job as a parent to have educated, intelligent children. By the time they leave your home, they should be educated and intelligent per the home training and worldview installed in them by their parents, by their responsible legal guardian adults known as parents, mom and dad. We just talked about this in the previous point. You want your child to be educated, whatever that word means to you. You want your child to be intelligent, again, whatever that means, and prepared, whatever that means. It's your job to make sure that anywhere you send them and anyone you allow to spend time with them is better preparing them for that outcome. If your child reaches the age of the majority, unprepared in these facets, you as a parent has failed to do your job. You cannot blame the school. Don't blame the neighborhood. Don't blame the other kids that your kid hangs with. Don't blame the government. All right, that's a waste of time. Only person you can blame is the person in the mirror because you're responsible. Who are you allowed to blame it on when they're your kids? Yeah, you can't blame anything on anybody. They're your kids. Who are you going to blame it on? It's all on you. If you are a concerned, engaged parent and you send your kids to a public school, let's say, it's your job to make sure that school is doing what you want them to do. After all, public schools are paid for with your tax dollars. So you go up to the schools or you go meet with the teachers or you go to the board meetings and you're making your voice heard because you don't like something that's happening and it appears you are being ignored and you're doing what they want to do anyway, which goes against your wishes. Well, now you have a decision to make. Are you serious about the things that you've been saying and you really want them to change? Or are you just saying it because it feels good and you're really not going to do anything, even if they completely ignore you? Well, if you're not going to do anything, well, they're going to keep ignoring you anyway. So what you going to do? Nothing. You might as well stay home in the first place. Now you have options. Maybe you can go bring your kid at home, teach them at home. Maybe you can move your kid to a different school. Maybe you can get them in private school. You can do something, but you can't do nothing if you say you're serious about something and the school is not listening to you. What are you going to do? You can't be the boy who cried wolf. Again, public schools are paid for with your money. So if you send your kids to a private school, again, the expectation is that you will be actively involved. All right, they don't even take your money unless you get actively involved. You got to come to the school. You got to come to a meeting. All right, they're looking at you. They're assessing the parents as much as they're assessing the kid before they decide if they will let you give them your money. They expect you to be engaged. They expect you to be involved, and they'll be letting you know this is what we want. And if your kid is in there acting like they don't have any sense, they'll kick your kid out. They'll kick your kid out. They won't take your money anymore because they got other people who are willing to give them money. They operate a little bit different parameters in a public school. The point being, if you don't like the way your child's education is going, you better do something about it. That's the point that I'm making here. As again, if you send your kid to a private school, you're spending actual dollars that come straight out of your pocket as to the tax dollars that come out of your paycheck. If you're homeschooling, even more so, you're paying a homeschooler, right? If you're the homeschooler, you're paying yourself. And if you hire a homeschool teacher, you got to pay that person. You're paying them straight out of your pocket. So you tell them how you want it to go. Whatever way you choose to slice the pie, ladies and gentlemen, how your children end up is your responsibility. That's the point here. And we're speaking specifically about education, but this applies to every aspect of your child's upbringing. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is your child's education is your responsibility. Point number 3 is whatever worldview that you want your kids to have, you must teach and install said worldview. Whatever worldview you want your kids to have, you must teach and install that worldview. So what do I mean when I say worldview? Worldview means your children's understanding of the basics and the principles of how life works and how the world works. It is your job to install a worldview into your children, because if you do not do that, a worldview will be installed, but it won't come from you. So this is how you get a 14 or 15-year-old kid denouncing their parents and trashing their parents and arguing with you at the dinner table over the basic tenets of how life works and the principles of life, because they learned something in school and you haven't taught them anything different at home. So now what they learned in school is conflicting with what you believe at home. And then your kid doesn't even respect you because they believe you're a bigot or you're racist or you have some type of privilege or you don't respect transgenders, or you're not a fan of the LGBTQ or whatever it is, because that's what they learned in school, and you didn't do your job of laying a strong enough foundation at home that when they got introduced to that nonsense in school, they were able to mentally reject it, but instead they mentally accepted it because you left an empty vessel in your kid's mind because you didn't install a worldview in the first place. That is your responsibility. You messed up. Mom, you messed up, Dad. Now, there are some parents out there who say, I want my kid to be whoever they want to be and think however they want to think, even if it disagrees with my worldview. I believe there are some parents out there who think that way. I would venture to guess most of the listeners to this show, y'all ain't those type of parents. I would venture to guess that. Maybe there are a few who do think that way. I don't think that way. I don't want my kids to go out and get a worldview that's completely different from mine because they're independent and they get to think whatever they want to think. No, the fuck you don't. No, you get to think whatever you want to think when you move out and you pay rent and you got your own and you pay your own bills. Then you think whatever you want and say whatever the hell you want. But you living under my roof, all right, this is the way it's going to go. All right, no, a boy cannot become a girl. No, you're not a victim because you're brown or black or whatever you call, whatever they're calling themselves these days. No, we ain't doing that. No, we're not flying no LGBTQ flags here. No, we're not supporting BLM over here. We ain't doing none of that bullshit. Why? Because I said so. Period. I don't give a damn what your teacher said. And as a matter of fact, my kid is not going to be in front of a teacher who's saying that shit. And if they are, that'll be the last day that they're with that teacher. As soon as I find out, it'll be over. So you as a parent, whatever worldview you want your kids to have, it is your job to teach and install that worldview. Don't send your kids to school and hope that the school does it. Again, what are you doing? You're abdicating responsibility. When you abdicate responsibility, you have no control, you have no power. Therefore, you cannot complain. That's how it works. And I found it interesting that there seems to be a divide on this concept. I've heard some parents say this, and I haven't heard them say it, not parents who I know personally, but I've heard some people say this on the internet, that they are okay with their kids having a worldview that's completely different from theirs. I'm not. Again, worldview is just your understanding of how the world works. What's true, what's not true, what's right, what's wrong, your kids' principles and standards, everything that goes along with those things. And again, I'm telling you as a parent, I will install a certain worldview into my children. You want to know what it is? Just listen to the show. I'm telling you what it is. And that worldview will not be negotiable between me and them. It's not a negotiation. Right? I don't negotiate with children. As long as they're under my authority, this is what it is. And they are not open to believe whatever they want to believe or think however they want to think and do what they want to do. Again, until or unless they get the hell out of here. All right. And they pay for their own bills and they put their own roof over their own heads. There will be a worldview. It is not negotiable. And it appears, as I said, there are some parents out there who think differently. And they actually, when I've heard this conversation the most, who I've heard it from the most are not parents. Who I heard from the most are people who are not parents. They're adults who don't have kids. And they're talking about, well, and they try to use these emotional blackmail tactics on someone like myself. They say, oh, well, you sound like a child abuser or a dictator, or you're not allowing your kid to think the way that you want them, the way that they want to think, and you're not allowing them to think freely. See, the kind of people who are saying this are childless people, many of whom are maybe part of the LGBTQ community, who either can't have kids or for the most part have chosen a lifestyle in which it's impossible, biologically impossible for them to have kids. So what they want to do is get control over other people's kids because they can't have any of their own. All right, fuck them. And no, we're not allowing this. That blackmail shit doesn't work on me. And I can call it out because I can identify it very easily. Some of you parents are easily falling for this bullshit. I will warn you. I'm offering you a word of warning through this anecdote. This is what they're doing. You got a bunch of people in the LGBTQP community. P is pedophiles. That's the next letter you're about to add to the list. In case you didn't know, you heard it here first. These people they mostly have chosen a lifestyle through which they cannot biologically have children, but they like children, so they want to get control of children, and they do it through the school system and through the information system that you know is the internet and social media. That's why you got to be very careful about the environment you're allowing your kids to engage in, including on those phones, including on the internet, away from your eyes. And I hear from these people who clearly do not have kids, and they'll even admit they don't have kids, and they want to talk about parenting. What the hell you know about parenting? You ain't a parent. Why are you speaking? Again, they say your children should be allowed to think, do, and be however they wish. No, they shouldn't. That's a ridiculous position. I'm not going to have a 12-year-old child sitting at my dinner table, living under my roof, telling me that a boy can become a girl unless I believe a boy can become a girl, because that's the only place they're going to get it. They're not going to go get it outside and then say, well, hey, Dad, I think a girl can become a boy or a boy can become a girl. No, they can't. And anything that they learn, if my kid was to ever go to school, or when they just go outside and talk to other kids, because eventually they're going to engage with a kid who believes some of this bullshit, and they got to be able to push back against the bullshit. They're going to understand the principles of how life works, and anything that they hear outside of my house, they're going to come home and say, oh, I heard this. And I'll ask them, okay, does that go with or against the principles that you already understand? See, if the worldview is properly installed, then the bullshit won't hurt. See, if you got an umbrella, then the rain doesn't bother you. But you got to have an umbrella. All right. Some of you parents aren't giving your kid an umbrella, then you're wondering why they come home soaking wet, if you're following my metaphor here. So you do not have, as a child, you don't have the freedom of thinking anything that you want, nor the freedom of speech to say what you want when you are under the roof of a parent who is holding on to their responsibility and their position of power of being in charge. This is what it is. I'm saying all that to say, when you send your kids to school, the teachers and the students at that school will be affecting the worldview of your child, or they'll be coming up against the worldview of your child. And what are they telling your kid, and are you okay with it? If you don't know the answer to the first question, you should be considering why you don't know. And maybe you might want to do something about that. I mean, if you are an actively engaged parent, that is. Now, once they become 18 and adult, now you send them off, you had 18 years to get them ready. Now, if they ain't ready by then, well, again, you done already messed up. Good news is they're 16. You still have time to do something. All right, they're still going to be there for a couple of years. You got time to install this worldview. But if you haven't done this up to this point, I suggest you get on it. I'm telling you all this stuff for a reason. Education, folks, is not just what they learn in school at some institution that you send them to every day for 8 hours. Education is what they're learning from you. And what they learn from you should be stronger than anything they learn in school. Let's recap today's class, which is parents, you are responsible for your child's education. Again, education has become a hot topic in America, and I got more coming on this soon. Number one, teachers are not at fault for what your kid does not know. If your kid ends up at the end of a grade unprepared based on your parameters, and it's because of you. You weren't watching what was happening. You didn't notice they were failing 2 weeks into the semester, but here we are 30 weeks into it, and now you're complaining. No, you dropped the ball, parent. You didn't do your job. Number two, it is your job to have an educated, intelligent children. That is, if you want educated and intelligent children. And if you want your kids to know stuff, you want them to be intelligent, you want them to be prepared, you better make sure they're intelligent, prepared, and wherever they're going every day is getting them more ready to be that. And if it's not, then you need to do something about it. Many parents are sitting on their hands doing nothing and hoping that some institution is going to do the job that you're responsible for doing. Point number three, whatever worldview you want your kids to have, you must teach and install that worldview. Understand, education, folks, does not mean what you learn at some government-sponsored building, like a public school. That is not education. Education is the etymology of the word education is to bring out from within, which means you need to be bringing out from within the truth as you see it and installing that into your children. And if you are not installing it, school is going to install something in them, which might be something you don't like. And it might cause them to not like you. Is that what you want? Yeah. Do you want a 12, 13, 16-year-old kid sitting at your dinner table telling you that your worldview is wrong and something's wrong with you because of something that they learned at school from some blue-haired lesbian who wants to tell your kid rather, how life is, and that teacher has no type of life of what you have, couldn't provide the lifestyle that you do for your kid, but they're teaching your kid how to think, and now your kid's going against the grain of what you and your spouse think simply because you and your spouse failed to do your job of teaching them the way that they need to be looking at the world and the principles they need to understand because you didn't do your job. Understand, folks, a child is an empty vessel. It will be filled. That vacuum will be filled with something. The question is what it's going to get filled with. It should be filled with something that came from you consciously and intentionally rather than something that comes from the secular world of the internet or the schools or the other kids that they're hanging with. I suggest you get on top of this, get on the ball and take control of the situation while you still have a chance to. All that said, tomorrow, we're going to be going into more about the education system. You'll see when that episode comes out tomorrow. We'll talk about that more then. Between now and then, Workonmygame.com. Get on my email list. You get my emails every day. Workonyourgameuniversity.com. Get direct access to me as your coach. Get access to all of our trainings, courses, and programs. Get a real life education that you can start applying right now and get real results ASAP with me as your coach. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all